I know some of you probably haven't met me before, so I am going to tell a little bit about myself. And then what I want to do after I do that is tell you why I'm seeking this volunteer opportunity of being the state party chairman. I want to talk about the goal that I believe we have to have for the Georgia Republican Party for the next 2 years, and then how I believe we go about accomplishing that goal. So a little bit about me. I'm from Columbus, Georgia, right on the border with Alabama, sort of west central Georgia. That's where my family's from. My grandfather dropped out of school in the 8th grade. His father was a mill worker in Columbus. He needed to help the family during the Great Depression. He did a lot of different jobs during that time until World War II broke out. He went, fought in the Pacific, came home. He was a railroad conductor. He delivered ice. He and my grandmother got married, and they had a series of small businesses. They owned a grocery store at 5th Avenue and 8th Street in downtown Columbus. They had a gas station. The last small business they owned and operated together, as he was in failing health due to Parkinson's, they had a laundromat. And one of my earliest memories is refilling the glass bottles in the Coca-Cola machine with him at the laundromat. And I tell you all of that because their sacrifice enabled my father to go to college and to law school, and then I followed in his footsteps and had the privilege of serving in the Georgia State Senate for 8 years, running for Secretary of State in 2018, and now standing before you to be a candidate for chairman of our party. There are a lot of countries where that sort of story is impossible, but in America, these stories are almost routine. There's something special about our country, and I know you wouldn't be here today if you didn't agree with me about that. But that brings me to the reason why I am seeking this office. So I spoke to my wife. That was the first conversation I had about this. And to my surprise, she was not just okay with this, she was enthusiastic about it. So then I called my dad. I talk to my dad every day. And I said, Dad, I've talked to Jacqueline. I said, we're going to do this thing, we're going to run for party chairman. And he said, son, how much does that pay? And I said, well, it doesn't pay anything, Dad. And he said, you're nuts. But the reason that I'm seeking this office is that for most of our history, we've had two political parties that may have disagreed on issues, but for the most part, at least agreed on what it meant to be an American. They agreed on the idea that America was the hero, not the villain of world history. We all agreed that there are two sexes, male and female, All of that is gone by the wayside. And we only have one responsible political party in this country. It's an imperfect vehicle, I'll be the first to say that. But the only way this country is successful, our state of Georgia is successful, that our local governments are successful, that we individually are successful, is if the Republican Party is a success. And that is why I am running, because we see what happens when we put the other side in charge, right? We've seen it in a very painful way play out over these last several years. And so we do not have an option. Failure is not an option. So that is why I'm seeking this office, because I believe it is incredibly important that the Republican Party be successful. So what does success look like? What is our goal for 2024? Our goal is to win the presidential election, period. We want to take the 16 electoral votes from Georgia, put them in the Republican column, because Democrats can win without Georgia. I submit to you, a Republican cannot win the White House without winning Georgia. We must win Georgia. And I'll just say another word about why that's important. We see what happens. Elections have consequences. This gentleman, Alvin Bragg, who ran for district attorney in New York City, he ran on a promise. And the promise was, I'm going to put Donald Trump behind bars. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I'm a lawyer. I took an oath to the Constitution and to the laws of this country and this state. And I can't think of anything more backward and wrong than to say, I don't like this person, so I'm going to figure out a way to put them in prison. I disagree with this person politically, so they belong in jail. That's something that we fought against with the Soviet Union. That's something we expect to happen in a country like Venezuela. We don't expect that in the United States of America, and yet here we are for the first time in 230 years with a president of the United States being prosecuted by a Soros-funded leftist district attorney in New York. That is bad enough. But we had 3 of them right here in Georgia, in Athens, in Savannah, and in Fulton County, Georgia. We have a leftist, Soros-funded district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia that is persecuting 16 of our fellow Republicans. And what was their crime? Their crime was to raise their hand and say, we will be electors for President Donald Trump. And while he is suing in Georgia courts to have this election reviewed, we're going to send our votes to Washington, D.C., so that if that contest is successful, that Georgia will be represented in the Electoral College. That's what they did. And yet we have this person persecuting these folks. I don't know if you've ever had the displeasure of being involved in a lawsuit, much less a criminal case, okay? But these people, they can't sleep at night. It's costing hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend themselves for the crime of being Republicans. So that's got to stop. It's got to stop. And so that's why we got to win this election. So how are we going to go about doing that? There are really 4 keys in my opinion. Number 1, we've got to do everything we can to come together in the 2024 election and get behind our presidential candidate, okay? Now, Democrats are very good at this. How many people in this room know who John Fetterman is? Anyone? Okay, so you know what I'm about to tell you about. Here's a guy, and I'm not poking fun, okay? But here's a guy who's a stroke victim, okay? He's got serious mental deficits. It was obvious if you watched the debates, you watched him try to deliver a message, you understood that. How many times did you hear a Democrat raise their hand and say, I just don't know if this is good for the country. I don't know if, we should really vote for this guy. They got behind him, and they got him elected. Now, I'm not suggesting we nominate a stroke victim for the U.S. Senate, okay? But what I am saying is, look at the difference between that and how Georgia Republicans were divided over Herschel Walker, okay? Yep. We had prominent Georgia Republicans go on national television and say they couldn't bring themselves to vote for our U.S. Senate nominee. That cannot happen next year. And so, the correct question to ask is, well, what are you going to do about it, Mr. Chairman? I believe in leading by example. When I was in the state Senate, we did not allow Georgia citizens to watch what was going on in our committee meetings online. You had to come down to the Capitol, hope there was a seat in the room if you wanted to see the business of your state government being conducted. And so, I got one of these out, one of these little computers, smartphones, and I said to my leadership, hey guys, we got to start streaming these meetings. They said, Josh, we don't have the money to do that. I said, okay, well, every committee meeting I'm a part of is going on the internet because I'm going to film it and I'm going to put it out there. And after a couple of weeks, suddenly they found $2 million to wire all the rooms for sound and video. That's leading by example. So how do we do that as a state chairman? Number 1, I'm not going to be negative, okay? There are plenty of people that can run down, the Republicans. I'm not going to be that person. I'm going to be like Ronald Reagan. I'm going to be relentlessly positive. I'm going to be looking for the things to emphasize that we're doing right. But I'm not going to say a negative word. There are 2 other people running in this race. You're not going to hear me say a negative word about them or any other Republican. Because my job is to get people excited about our Republican candidate for president next year. That is my job. Secondly, there's going to be a primary. I know everybody in here is going to have an opinion. They're going to have candidates they're excited about. When a candidate comes to Georgia, we're going to promote the heck out of them, okay? We're going to get people excited about it. But I'm not going to play in the primary. I'm not going to get behind any particular candidate until we have our candidate. Then I will work every day doing everything I can possibly do to get that person Georgia's 16 electoral votes. That's the job, okay? So number one, come together. Number two, we have to raise money. People don't like talking about this. When you are running for office, as I have done several times, I would say raising money is like asking your children to eat their vegetables. Nobody wants to do that. It's the last thing they want to do. But I've run for office as a state senator 4 times. I ran for Secretary of State once. I've raised over $1 million in those races in political contributions. I've also raised money for the Georgia Republican Party, for other conservative candidates and causes. This is a skill that has to be learned. It is not something that you want someone to learn once they become the Georgia Republican Party chairman. I am ready on day one to do that. I am also working now, not on June 10th, but right now, to establish a finance team. Because it's not just the chairman. I can't do all of this alone. We've got to have people that are talented in raising the resources we need to be successful. I served with a state legislator named Calvin Smiry from Columbus. Calvin had been in the legislature longer than I had been alive. But one of the things that we did agree on, he said it takes coal to run a train and gold to run a campaign. And that's what it takes. Let's see if I can. This is kind of going out. Is this, okay, that's better. So we're going to raise the money it takes to be successful. That's number 2. Number 3, training. The state party needs to be a resource bank for county parties. That means making sure we've got training for our county chairs, our precinct chairs, and our volunteers. And it also means, I'm going to say 2 words that are extremely important to me. We've got to set up the best election integrity unit in America. Okay? Because there are people on the sidelines because they don't trust our process. And so we've got to do the hard work of getting not just poll watchers, but poll workers. We need our people in the precincts working the polls, making sure our laws are being followed. And we need to make sure we have a legal team that's defending the Republican position, that's intervening in Democrat lawsuits to weaken our voter laws. And as an attorney myself who has practiced election law, I know what it takes to make that happen. So training, standing up this election integrity unit, making training available not just at in-person meetings around the state, but on demand on our website. So when you have a meeting, you can access the training. We live in an on-demand world, and we need to get with that program as the Georgia Republican Party.
Yes.
So 4th and finally, communications. We need to do a better job of communicating our message. If you saw last week that the Democrats chose Chicago over Atlanta, I could give a whole other speech about that, but they chose Chicago over Atlanta for the Democratic National Convention. The AJC actually had a headline that said, "What Republicans lost because Democrats aren't coming to Atlanta for the DNC." Now I want y'all to compare that to the stories that we all remember when the All-Star game left Atlanta and went to Colorado, right? It was war is declared type headlines. It's Armageddon because we lost the All-Star game. We can't rely on traditional media to tell our story. So the Georgia Republican Party has to be a content creation machine. We have to be the ones to tell our stories and to tell it in a way that reaches people that, frankly, might not come to a meeting like this, okay? Our 18 to 25-year-olds, people of color, we've got to reach everybody. And that means short explanatory videos, podcasts, reaching people where they are, much better use of our social media network, okay? We can do that. This is low-hanging fruit. We can accomplish it together. And we can engage people in a way that makes sense. Not hire an outreach director 3 or 4 months before an election and say, here's our person, this is the person that's going to reach out to every community that doesn't hear from Republicans. That's offensive to do that. We need to spend the entire 2 years coming up talking to people, not just in this room, but everybody. Because our ideas are the best ideas, right? Don't y'all agree with that? We just have to tell people and let them know. And that also means recruiting candidates. The best outreach program we can have is somebody running in a community that hasn't seen a Republican candidate for office in a decade or 2 decades, knocking on their neighbor's door and saying, let me tell you why Republican ideas are the best ideas. So if we do those 4 things, we come together, we raise the financial resources, we stand up excellent training and an election integrity unit second to none, and we really improve the way we communicate with Georgians, then we're going to celebrate in November of 2024, not just electing a Republican president and sending Joe Biden back to some facility in Delaware, but we'll be able to celebrate electing Republicans up and down the ballot. So if you're interested in learning more, you can find out more at my website. It's McKoonforChairman.com. I want this volunteer opportunity. I would really be honored to have your vote in Columbus on June 10th. Josh McKoon for Georgia Republican Party Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Really appreciate it. Does anyone have any burning question? I did say questions. We only have time for like 1 question. So, yeah, go ahead. Yes. Yes.
Sorry, I want to hear it. Do you think the 2020 election was stolen?
I think that there were a lot of problems with the 2020 election in Georgia, and I'll tell you a couple of them. We never should have had 6.9 million absentee ballot applications sent to every registered voter on the roll in the state. That was a huge mistake. And it wasn't even in line with existing Georgia law. We should never have had drop boxes, okay? Drop boxes at the time were granted by an emergency order. You know, those were not authorized under Georgia law in the 2020 election. So there are numerous issues with the election. I don't think that we can have, I don't think anybody can stand here and say to you that the certified count result was the accurate final result of the election, because we didn't have a full statewide manual recount. And that is really what you needed to have confidence in the election. When the president filed an election contest and he raised questions about this election, Georgia law says that 20 days, within 20 days of that filing, he's entitled to a hearing in court. It's a shall, not a may, okay? That hearing never happened. It was a huge failure on the part of our judicial system. And by the way, the same judge who was handling the special grand jury is the judge that refused to give us a hearing in that 20-day period. They simply waited until after January 6th and said, oh, your case is moot now. Too bad. That does incredible damage to our system of government, because our whole system of government is premised on people having confidence in the result of our elections. And when you make all of these changes in the middle of an election, you know, now we're not going to verify signatures on absentee ballots. Now we're going to have drop boxes. And there's, by the way, no rhyme or reason to how many drop boxes or where the drop boxes are located, what part of the county has drop boxes, what part doesn't, okay? All of those changes and then no judicial review. I understand why everybody, including myself, has serious concerns about the 2020 election and continue to have concerns about appropriate election procedures. That's why one of the key elements of my leadership in the Georgia Republican Party is standing up a statewide election integrity unit, because we have to do everything we can to try to ensure that we have a fair election and that people are confident of the result of the 2024 election.
Thank you, Josh. All right, well, everyone, we have to continue moving forward, but just so you know, Josh McKoon, fellow GRA member, he will be there at the State Endorsing Convention on April 29th, which will also be being held, I don't know if it's this district or in another
Cobb.
one, but it's going to be in Cobb County, in Smyrna. So, RA members, please make sure to sign up for that. Josh will be there. That's when you all will be having the chance to decide who the GRA endorses statewide for chairman of the state party and the other statewide offices. So hope you're all there. First off, we're going to get back in the agenda with the presidential candidates. We're going to start off with the video submitted by candidate Donna Watson for district chair. And that will be the first bit. And while that's going on, if any other district chair candidates are here, please come up to the stage now and take your seats, because as soon as the video is over, we'll be moving into that part of the agenda.
This being said, I've been
greatest part. But we have got to work together. We have got to stop trying to divide ourselves. When we attack each other, we become more divided. And the more divided we become as a party, the weaker we become. We need to be a strong Republican Party. We need to follow Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment, and that is, thou shalt not speak ill of another Republican. So we have a lot of work to do. With good leadership and good volunteers, we can make it happen. So please be sure and go on the website, register for the convention. It's April the 22nd at South Forsyth High School, and I will see you there.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
point of information, could Nathaniel give us how long that file was?
Oh, time-wise?
Yeah,
Was 5 minutes and 40 seconds.
I would ask that the rules be modified. I know we've adopted the rules, but it would be unfair to let one speaker speak for 5 minutes and 40 seconds and let the other people who are here who came to the meeting not speak for the same length of time or have that available to them.
All right, so that's a motion to suspend the rules. I'll take a 2/3 vote. Is there any discussion on that?
Just a point, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, 3 seconds.
I was going to make a point that with all the questions that will be asked, the folks will get 2 minutes to speak, and then they'll have several questions to answer. So when it's all said and done, they should end up speaking for more than 5 minutes and 40 seconds. Just FYI.
So was there a second to suspend the rules?